Man, 2017. What the hell happened in 2017 in gaming? Sure, there was a year filled with controversy of loot boxes, microtransactions, and general shitty behavior. But my god, did the gaming industry bring it this year in almost every area. Horror, action, RPGs, visual novels, experimental games, all genres were represented well this year. And to be frank, this year was a nightmare when it came to doing a typical top 10 games of the year list. In fact, it's one that I didn't feel like I could pull off without feeling guilty. There were too many good games this year, and for all the disappointments, the Battlefield 2s, the ukuleles, there was a AAA title that actually delivered on its promises, a AA game that got overlooked, and 3 hidden indie gems that really needed more sales. So that's why I've got something different this year. See, I didn't just want to highlight 10 games, especially the games that ended up in my overall top 10. So I decided to do things a little bit differently this year. First, I'm splitting the list into 2. The story-based portions of games in one list, and the gameplay portions of games in the other. I feel like these are the primary 2 elements that people look for in games, and the one that may split people down the middle in terms of what the best game of the year is. Now, games can be on both lists if they were strong in both areas, but I'm trying to keep it focused on one element in question. Now, this list focuses on the gameplay portion, and the story one will be following with a number that represents what it looked like in my overall game of the year list if I had one, but we'll be focusing on the story-based element for that specific list. Lastly, a few rules. This is my own personal list and is not objective. Again, these are what I enjoy. Secondly, I had to play the game. Games like Pyre and Prey may have been great, but frankly I didn't play them, and so they aren't on the list. Now, I did try to play as many games as possible, but sooner or later I just had to cut it off. I apologize for that, but I only have a limited amount of time. So without further ado, these are my top 15 games in terms of gameplay for 2017. Number 15. Fire Emblem Heroes. The only mobile game on this list, Fire Emblem Heroes has been my go-to game on the go, while still actually enjoying myself while playing it. The simplification of the series formula to fit on your phone was a smart one, cutting out some of the bigger army-based battles of 10 to 12 units and moving it down to a 4-unit assault against your enemies that was quick and easy to pick up and enjoy, but still had that little bit of strategy that you would expect out of the series. The RPG elements and sheer amount of customization that the game added over the year helped define it, with seals, unique weapons, a ton of heroes, and some new maps. Now let's be clear here. This game will never live up to Fire Emblem Awakening or Fire Emblem The Sacred Stones. It doesn't have that much complexity, or the idea of losing your heroes to really make you feel the challenge. But Intelligent Systems understood how to transfer the series correctly, and for me, hit that right balance of monetization while doing it in a way that didn't force you to pay for things. There's plenty of orbs to earn from all the missions you go on to make a great team, and with big events, it makes sure to balance new orbs to give you at least a chance to get a new hero as well. Now, am I necessarily happy with the gacha system? No, but it's also one of the better gacha systems I've seen. I've never felt like I needed to spend money on the game, but I have because I wanted to support it. It's nice to see the game is still going strong in terms of updates a year after its release, and I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. It's my strategy fix on the go, and it fills a niche when I don't have time to pull out my Switch or get back home, but still want to finally remember the days of me playing games all day. Number 14. Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Yep, Breath of the Wild is this low on the list. Yes, many people's game of the year barely cracked my top gameplay games of the year list, and didn't even crack the story-based list. I have to admit, for all the hype that Breath of the Wild got, I never found myself truly infatuated with it. Don't get me wrong, I see the game's strengths, what it brings to the table, and it's a type of game that just doesn't necessarily hit my personal preferences. I love the Zelda series as a whole, but I like the idea of more constrained gameplay that I got out of Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess than I do Breath of the Wild. And to be fair, it's possible that I just haven't played enough of it. Breath of the Wild is a game that wants you to explore and experiment. It wants you to think about how you get up that mountain that's freezing cold. Do you go and get the right clothes to help resist it? Do you bring fire on a stick to help you out? Do you eat the right food to give you cold resistance? In many ways, there's a lot of freedom in Breath of the Wild, and the game will reward you for trying something new and creative, unlike many games of its genre. Hell, seeing some of the things that people have pulled off in the game is fascinating to watch. It's just that though, if you're not into that, if you're not into exploration, the game is going to feel so much of a slog. And while I like freedom, I also felt like it gave too much freedom at times and needed to hold your hand a tiny bit more. The fact that it took me so long to figure out how to cook a piece of food was a little bit aggravating to say the least. Why Breath of the Wild is low on the list is simple for me. The core combat still works, and the emphasis on some of the new arrow gameplay and different uses of the Sheikah Slate were impressive. It falters though in the dungeons for me. They didn't feel like the dungeons of past games, and in particular the main dungeons that I'm talking about, aka the Divine Beasts. They felt too constrained and too narrowed down, possibly due to the fact that there was an open world concept now, and that you may have come across it at any point and in any order. The open world portion was great, but that core experience, especially the bosses, just didn't ring true to me. They felt like a shell of their former selves, and that's where a lot of my key memories in this series lies. The Water Temple, the Shadow Temple, the Forest Temple. Okay, yes, I'm saying a lot of Ocarina of Time, but you get the idea. Nothing really stood out for me in terms of the dungeons in this game. Very similar to a game that I didn't necessarily enjoy in the Zelda series 2, Skyward Sword. Maybe over time it will grow and grow and grow on me, and will eventually make its way higher on this list. But for now, it barely scrapes by. But it's still a game worth playing, especially if you like exploring and experimenting. Number 13. 20XX. Remember how I said this list was subjective? This is the prime example of it. 20XX has several problems. Sometimes the procedural level design can make a level that's not fun to move through. There's something lacking in its presentation, and the bosses can feel a little bit too easy at times. With that said, I'm a Mega Man junkie. It's my crack cocaine of video games. Throw me a Mega Man and I'll be all over it. Mighty Number 9 doesn't count. 20XX immediately reminds you of a classic Mega Man game, with the ability to jump off walls or jumping from phasing platforms in the style that you'd expect from the X series, at least a tiny bit. The controls feel a tiny bit looser, but still works well within this game, and some of the enemies truly feel like fateful reimaginings of creatures from the Mega Man universe. And note how I said reimagining. Not copy and pasted creatures, but small alterations of patterns to give you reasonably familiar challenges while still being different. Now granted, going through the levels feels a bit easier than the regular Mega Man series, but there's somewhat a reason for this: the roguelike nature of the game. The big thing to note is that after each level, you aren't necessarily given your health back, so losing any form of health is a problem, and while you can find ways to replenish it, sometimes you just don't have the nuts to spend to get that health. This is where I think 20XX is the strongest. The use of the Mega Man type levels and integrated with roguelite and item mechanics that can be really fun, especially as you unlock some of the more interesting variations of abilities and weapons, and really customize your hero in the end. Customization in the difficulty option is a nice touch too, as the hardest mode has skull modifiers to really push your limits if the difficulty isn't holding up for you. Which for a Mega Man veteran, this was sorely needed. But the game does hit a good variance of challenge and nostalgia, and it does have online co-op, which is nice to see because honestly I didn't expect it here. It didn't blow me away, but it was a solid game with my favorite series in mind, and that's enough to make it onto number 13 on this list. And yes, you can now start flaming me for putting 20XX higher than Breath of the Wild. I give you permission. Number 12. Cryptarch. Look, did you honestly think I'd go a year with a gameplay list without a roguelike game on it? Of course you didn't if you follow this channel. And Cryptarch is one of those that got overlooked by so many in the process, maybe due to it being in early access and starting in 2016 on its release. But don't overlook this combo of a twin-stick shooter with a strategy type game. It's a game that ends up having a lot of tricks up its sleeve. Cryptarch allows you to salvage the remains of still alive ships by taking a small mech and working your way through a series of turrets, traps, and enemies in order to destroy that ship's core. You'll need to do it while adhering to several objectives that'll earn you money, such as keeping core components of the ship alive, like the repair node for salvage, or only using limited armor to shield yourself. This keeps the variety of each mission up, as you attempt to figure out the best course of action by using the map beforehand to plan your route of attack. And how you end up taking out the variety of enemies, each with their own strengths, is up to your choice of which mech to start with, and how you adapt to the weapons and items you find along the way. Each weapon in the game feels unique in its firing pattern and its usage, as even the base level machine guns end up having small differences in aiming, feel, recoil when it comes all down to it. I love some of the creative weapons like the goop launcher that have specific purposes, or cluster rocket launchers, because who doesn't love cluster rocket launchers? Defensive options are aplenty too, with shield and movement options. Enemies hit a good variety here, especially in combinations with each other, and keep the pressure on you without horribly exposing themselves at times. The controls are where they need to be, and it only really suffers in the long run when it comes to content. You'll get 10 to 15 hours of gameplay out of the game, before it starts feeling really repetitive. But that core experience is why you would want to play Cryptarch, and it's a game you should take a flyer on if you have the chance, because you'll be glad you did. Number 11. Gravity Rush 2. Think about a lot of the AAA titles over the past 5 years. How many of them would you say had some gameplay element that was truly unique? I'm not talking something small like a time-stopping mechanic. I'm talking something that actually makes you go, damn, I haven't played something close to that before. Which is always a gamble when it comes to these games, as sadly, some players won't take a chance on a gameplay style that they don't know they will enjoy. And sadly again, the Gravity Rush series seems to fall into that category, as the game didn't necessarily do gangbusters in sales numbers. That's really a shame, because there's not a lot of games that handle aerial combat and movement so uniquely as the series by Kiichiro Toyama. The ability to shift gravity, not fly, but shift gravity, makes movement one of the best things about the game. Hell, you'll probably ignore the fast travel system in the game for this reason alone, as the idea of moving freely in the air becomes addicting. These controls do work despite you maybe not thinking that at first, as the amount of control you have in refinement in your fault is massive, but it takes a bit of time to really get accustomed to the new movement style. When you do finally get a hang of it, however, it's thrilling to move yourself in tight corridors, attempting to make your way through the narrowest of spaces that are closing in on you. Then when you do get into combat, it's where everything about this movement system all comes together. Sure, you could just chuck all the random things you can see at enemies, but there's nothing more satisfying than getting a combo going, kicking off one enemy and then hitting the next, to the point where it's a Circus Olade performance. The new forms added in the second game's iteration help a bit as well, to deal with some of the more specialized enemies, and bosses can feel like epic encounters as you desperately try to get to that last hit before they do. It's also helped by a good series of side quests that hit the gambit of looking for specific locations on a map via exploration, to using your gravity powers to fill up a moving cart. Granted, the more open world portions in the mining sections can get really repetitive and are a low light of the game, but they are also a place to refine your skills. It doesn't make it higher on this list due to the fact that the challenge does eventually top out, and you'll feel like the game could have gone to the next level at certain points. It also does suck that the more custom elements of the game will be going away on July 18th due to the lack of player base on the game, and that was after a fan outcry delayed that release. But that means that this is the best time to pick up the game, especially if you can get it on the cheap, because it really is an experience that you've probably never had before, and that does mean something in today's world where everyone wants to copy the next person. Number 10. Horizon Zero Dawn. This may be my personal surprise of the year, at least when it comes to how I thought I would react to the game. I mean, let's face it, there's several reasons why you don't see a lot of open world game coverage on this channel. Usually I don't think the game needs the coverage because everyone seems to want it, and to be frank, it's getting sort of repetitive, and I'd rather play something truly unique. But after hearing so many good things about Horizon Zero Dawn, I couldn't help but give it a try. And yes, I did really enjoy the limited time that I've put into the game so far, despite it really not doing anything that different when it comes to the formula. That in itself is sorta a feat. Something about the combination of the stealth elements of hiding from enemies on top of the focus of mainly ranged arrow gameplay helps to define Horizon Zero Dawn for me compared to other games in the genre. There's something fast-paced about it that really helps things. Yeah, I could scope out an area of an enemy stronghold that has a bunch of enemies in it, use the environment around me to really gain an advantage. This is the most surprising to me. The game feels so fast-paced, as I'm running from enemies launching arrows, trying to keep out of their deadly range while I put everything I have into them. The chaos that's caused here is refreshing. I died quite a bit early on trying to understand what the game was trying to teach me, and learned little by little how to play the game to my advantage. Exploration is fun with the environment because there's a good pace for the encounters and new things to see as you go along the game. There's something breathtaking about seeing the first robotic long-necked dinosaur creature and finding your way to the top of it, despite the fact that, yeah, it's basically a radio tower. The ability to throw down traps and lure enemies in, this has been done before, but with Horizon, it feels different. That's the key here, it feels different. Also, on top of it, the boss battles that I did do were fantastic, as trying to take down an invading army or a huge corrupted creature kept me on the edge of my seat. Now, did I play a lot of Horizon Zero Dawn? No, I wish I had played more, but unless you want this list in 2019, I wouldn't have been able to. But what I played proved why it was a contender for Game of the Year, even with the formula being pretty much the same as you've seen before. I will play it more in the future, and that's a good sign considering my busy schedule. Number 9. Resident Evil 7. After the series reinvented itself in the survival horror genre to the action survival horror genre with the fantastic Resident Evil 4, Capcom hasn't exactly been kind to one of its historic franchises. Sure, Resident Evil Revelations was a great game and was overlooked in my opinion, but Resident Evil 5 stumbled with the new co-op measures and losing some of its cheesy charms. Resident Evil 6 couldn't seem to figure out what kind of horror game it really wanted to be, so it decided to try to be all of them at the same time, and failed miserably. And don't get me started on Resident Evil Revelations 2. That was not a good game. I will fight anyone who says otherwise. Thankfully, the series has now changed. A whole hell of a lot to the series' benefit. A second rebirth in my opinion, which is ironic given the game's core material. Resident Evil 7 shifted to a first-person perspective, and thankfully did the controls perfectly. As in perfect for a game in question, not being too precise and making you panic when creatures came at you while you weren't expecting it, but gave you enough control to hit those shots when they truly counted. Enemy AI is a lot tougher this time around in conjunction with that, and a hell of a lot smarter than, well, Resident Evil Revelations 2. Yes, I'm still bitter about this moment, and I won't let it go. These enemies may not be the height of AI, but they do their job, not getting stuck on the environment and putting pressure on you. And it's different kinds of pressure too, not letting you get comfortable with the gameplay mechanics till the end of the game, switching to more trap-based rooms, or introducing new enemy types that take a bit more oomph or strategy to take out. What Resident Evil 7 got right in every aspect of the gameplay was the atmosphere. And you may argue that that should be part of the story element of the game. But I highly disagree with a horror game though, because that's what you're here for. The feeling of dread of a situation barreling down on top of you. Resident Evil 7 felt like a proper return to the horror roots of the series. Things were tense. That opening sequence with a father walking around, yeah, it was terrifying when you got caught. And the game's harder mode kept the challenge up and the horror going into it in unique and interesting ways. And that's what you want out of a game like Resident Evil 7. To be scared out of your mind. Number 8. Sonic Mania. You know, for a protagonist that really wants to go fast, it took us a while to get here, didn't it? The Sonic series has always been a series of ups and downs in my mind. In fact, I don't think I've seen a series that fluctuates more than the Blue Speedster. You get a fantastic game like Sonic Generations that seems to get a lot of things right. Then several years later, you get Sonic Boom that can't seem to get anything right. It tried to reinvent itself in several ways and always seemed to miss the mark when it tried it. And even when it tried to go back to its roots, this series found a way to miss the mark there, with faulty physics in Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1. But luckily for fans of the Hedgehog, Sega decided to put an iteration of the series in the hands of some fans. And what we got was the fantastic Sonic Mania. Mania understands that Sonic is not about specifically going fast, but feeling like you're going fast and earning that speed. Running through a level, jumping at the right times to keep your momentum going, and passing over several enemies in the process feels so right here. This is thanks to fantastic level design, which always allowed you to gain back enough speed to get you progressing again without forcing others to slow down at their expense in terms of their runs. The controls and physics for this are perfect too. I always felt in control of Sonic, and he always seemed to miss a jump that I screwed up on while making the ones that I truly nailed. Replayability was high with the multiple routes present, and it was a game that I actually found myself wanting to shave seconds off my times, which is a rarity for me. Now, I enjoyed the Sonic gameplay the most, but a good change in pace was here with the Tails and Knuckles sections, helping things out in the long run. Bosses were a little hit and miss, but when they did hit, they were pretty gosh darn fun. And when the game even got more creative at points in ways that I didn't expect, yeah, they made me smile. Sonic will always seem to find a way to get a game released, even when it's at its lowest point. But Sonic Mania was probably one of the best Sonic games in the last 10 years, and it is a great way to introduce yourself to the genre and the franchise if you haven't experienced it up to this point. Hopefully Sega takes this game and improves on it, and gives us even more Sonic Manias in the near future. Number 7. Fight Enrage. Surprised to see a game that you probably never heard of this high in the list? You must not know this channel. Or you've already watched the underrated games of 2017 list for this channel, but regardless, if all things were fair in life, no one should be unfamiliar with this game. Because I've talked about the idea of simple complexity in a lot of different forms on this channel. And don't get me wrong, I love a spectacle fighter like Bayonetta 2, or a good complex roguelite with several systems that I have to maximize. But sometimes, all you need from a game is the ability to beat the shit out of everyone around you with simple punches and kicks. Double Dragon, Streets of Rage. You don't see these types of games that often nowadays. Well, Fight Enrage is a blast from the past, and yet there's enough of an evolution here in the genre to warrant a strong look. Simple beat-em-up mechanics that rely on smart positioning and timing help to bring me back to the days of Turtles in Time and Double Dragon. But Sega Games Dev didn't stop there. It added a good amount of fighting game mechanics, with the ability to block and use anti-air while dealing with hordes of enemies. There's good evolutions of older systems here too, like the special attack meter, giving it a time-based element on top of allowing you to sacrifice health to gain just a little bit more space in battle that you possibly need. Each level introduces a new challenge, whether it be fighting on a raft and having to stand more still, or dealing with a wrestling leopard that will punish you for staying still and close for too long, making you focus on hit-and-run tactics. Every time I played the game, I found myself enjoying it more and more, with depth of multiple characters, and doing my best to juggle enemies against the wall in a flurry of kicks and special moves. Some can argue that the game does get repetitive over time, but this is the arcade-like style it's going for. It's designed for you to master it over time, learning how each enemy moves and where their weaknesses are. It punishes you for doing something that you shouldn't be, like being too aggressive by having the boss perform a wake-up attack. And the local co-op is a blast. Get your best friends together just to have a real good go at it, while making fun of each other or causing each other to fall off the raft in one level. You'll be glad you picked up this game, because Fight Enrage is a great blend of old and new, and deserves a lot more recognition than it has gotten. A whole hell of a lot more. Number 6. Cuphead. There's plenty of games that bring an amazing art style and a whole lot of flash, but not all of them back up their beautiful visual ballet with the substance of fantastic gameplay. And let's be clear, Cuphead is deserving of all the best presentation awards of 2017, because the sheer amount of passion put into every battle is breathtaking. Individually drawn segments that must have taken forever, and yet seamlessly transition into a visual display of delight. But underneath that layer of vanity is a layer of solid gameplay design, smartly designed unique boss battles, and the best kind of gameplay frustration, one that drives you forward to want to overcome it. Now, is it the most difficult side-scrolling shoot-'em-up game I've ever played? Not even close. But it doesn't have to be. All it needs is to understand the design elements to make the genre succeed. Recognizable patterns that allow you just enough time to dodge incoming dangers, while constraining that period enough so that it's a repeatable challenge. Bosses that change up their strategies from fight to fight, section to section, to keep you on your toes and forcing you to change your strategy of aggression versus conservatism. And a set of simple yet responsive controls combined with a simple set of weapons that get the job done, but allow you to play with the strategy just a tiny bit. The name of the game is Precision if you want to beat bosses in a reasonable time frame, but patience can be really rewarded here. It's just like Enrage, to be honest with you. There's a lot of hidden complexity in the simple gameplay here, but it's simple to play for anyone, just hard to master. Sure, the game does have some gameplay flaws with the more side-scrolling sections that feel a little bit forced in there, and once in a while a game throws a section at you that feels a little bit off compared to the theme of the fight that you're in, or makes you want to rip your hair out. See the dragon fight. But those are small nitpicks compared to a game that keeps up a high energy pace and keeps you engrossed with bullets, dodging, and everything else up to the very end. Sure, I feel like it's a one-run type of game, but that one run will be magical. Number 5. Nier Automata. Sure, Yoko Taro is the brains behind the now massive hit of the Nier series, but it's thanks to Platinum Games and the tweaking of their signature action gameplay that lands Nier Automata on this list. They did so while keeping the presence in the revamped combat still alive in this game, with the bullet hell type mechanics still making a huge difference, but still twisted to the new flair of this combat. And let's be clear, it's the combat that drives Automata to number 5 on this list, as some of the non-combat quests end up holding the game a little bit back. I personally like the hard difficulty and the inability to lock onto your opponent melee-wise because it emphasizes your positioning in battle and focusing on one enemy and wearing it down while keeping your eyes on the rest of them ready to take out half of your health bar. The witch time dodge mechanic is still present from games like Bayonetta 2, but it acts less about getting more damage in during that time and more to put yourself in the right position so you don't take more damage after you get out of it. Switching between light and heavy attacks with swords and axes, then going in for a ranged attack to keep enemies away from you, it all works to wear down your enemies and yet still have you standing in the end. Platinum got creative in their game, using the camera better than any other game in their history. Sometimes you'd end up with a top-down perspective, others you would just be to the side. It ends up causing you to adapt repeatedly over the course of the game, as the new perspective would have different strengths and weaknesses that you'd have to adjust to on the fly, whether it was the inability to see enemies or attacks coming, or changing the trigger that you'll need to know when to dodge. The game also switches up activities with more traditional shmup sections, and 9S gets a hacking minigame that provides a nice change of pace. The specialization of the chipset helps define your experience to be your own, letting you adjust certain parameters to help you in battle, or just to give you that extra boost that you truly needed. I like on top of how you can just get another ability or two out of it by removing basic things that you may normally rely on, like the mini-map. It could help create some truly unique runs, and gives the game a bit of replayability despite you getting about 50 to 60 hours out of the main quest. Square Enix really truly hit a home run with getting the combination of Taro and Platinum Games on this one, as the game is one great big overall package. It just so happened that it started with its gameplay. Number 4. Super Mario Odyssey. Okay, before you throw the book at me for including Odyssey this high on the list while having Breath of the Wild that low, understand that the core experience that I enjoyed in the Mario franchise is in Odyssey. You have your levels, your exploration, and your freedom of movement that can reward precise and precision platforming without sacrificing the ability for less experienced or skilled players to also enjoy it. The new ability to take over enemies only extended that gameplay, and it's why for me, Odyssey was a game to pick up and enjoy here and there, rather than feel like I needed to sit down and focus to enjoy it like I did with Breath of the Wild. Each world feels expansive yet unique in its own way, presenting different challenges that keeps the gameplay relatively fresh. Sure, there were common elements that presented them in each world, of course, but there was enough of a twist each time to not make it feel like you were doing the same old thing. I also have to give the game a lot of props in the pacing department in terms of progression here. Downtime at the start of a new area was little, and you moved on to the next without feeling like you had to stretch your time in any one area. But if you wanted to complete an area, there was plenty to do, and you didn't have to search entirely up and down every pixel in order to do it. The unique character elements also really helped vary the gameplay, with you being able to take over pretty much a majority of characters. It almost felt like mini-games built into the actual 3D platforming, whether it was flicking yourself up a wall with a beak, or taking hold of a classic Hammer Brother. And what's even better is that the controls here were pretty much spot on, never feeling too awkward after you understood what they were trying to do. Now, the only things that I can really hold against Odyssey is that the number of moons is just a little bit too high, and some of the moons that they throw at you, yeah, I want some easy moons, but I don't want to trip over a moon, if that makes sense. Granted, some of them are very, very hard to get, and some of them are very, very interesting to get. It's just that I wish there was a better balance at times. It was the next step in the evolution of Mario, and frankly, anybody who said that Nintendo was done after the Wii U, you were sorely, sorely mistaken, because they focus on quality of games, and with games like Mario Odyssey, they're gonna be around for a long time. Number 3, Persona 5. If you're a fan of this channel, you maybe didn't see this coming. I pretty much said that Persona 5 was my game of the year over the course of Twitter and pretty much in a couple of other videos. But this is where the weakness of splitting my list into sections come. Persona 5 is the complete package. Almost every element of it works together in a harmony of beautiful bliss. But when looking at each individual section, there were 2 other games that, in the case of gameplay, ended up surpassing it. Part of that is the genre that it's in. JRPGs really need to be well-rounded in order to succeed, and while gameplay is important, it's only one aspect that can only go so far in some cases. But don't get me wrong, Persona 5 got the most out of its gameplay though, that's for sure. The turn-based RPG system is the bread and butter that you've come to expect here. Smack an enemy around for some turn-based damage, try to stay alive, rinse and repeat. But Persona 5's unique systems that enhance that experience are all pretty much excellent. The ability to capture and raise personas for battle for Joker is the start, as you get a Pokemon-like mentality of catching them all and seeing what they do and how you can combine them. The elemental weakness system combined with knocking enemies down adds a bit of strategy to single out specific enemies, but the fact that it also applies to you makes it a bit more tactical, especially when you consider that if Joker goes down, the game is over. The tagging system to make combos was fun as hell to use, and it hit that right balance of difficulty that you would want out of an RPG without requiring a bad form of grinding. Exploring the dungeons was fun, especially using the mechanic to get the jump on enemies without it feeling horribly required. The cherry on top of all of this is the relation system with all the confidants, and how they actually make a huge difference in your gameplay. Yes, the overall day system really helps to really make your team unique, your strategy unique, and everything feels like it makes a difference. There may have been a hiccup or two here and there over the entire gameplay, but I'm really hard-pressed to find something that the game did wrong in this area that is truly a negative. All the complaints I have really had a reason for them to exist. Normally, this would have probably taken Gameplay Game of the Year considering all of that, but it actually just went up against 2 powerhouses in this area this year. But third is nothing to scratch your nose at. And, well, you'll find out that Persona 5 is gonna show up again on the other list. Number 2. Divinity Original Sin 2. To be perfectly honest, if the experience keeps up that I've had with Divinity Original Sin 2 up to this point goes until the ending credits, it will be the Gameplay Game of the Year. I've put 35 hours into the game so far, And I'd like to thank Mermaid Illustration, aka Andrea, for accompanying me on the long gameplay quest. It has been one of the best pure RPG experiences that I've played. And granted, it does take the silver this time around, not due to any one weakness that I see. It's just that I don't think I can fully put it at number 1 without have beating it, just in case the game stumbles in power and difficulty at the end, and with the other game on this list, it didn't do so. But what you have is a game that is so in-depth and has so many options to play that you can get lost in it for days, months, years even. The sheer insanity of what the game allows you to do to beat a situation is mesmerizing. For example, and I really wish I had a clip of this here, I was able to cure a character that I thought was uncurable with blessing a puddle of blood they were standing in, thanks to seeing blood all around where they were, knowing the bless power should cure them but wasn't doing it directly, and thinking that maybe, just maybe, the two were connected to each other. And lo and behold, it worked. That's Divinity Original Sin 2. Being creative and exploring your powers, your team, and finding a solution you didn't expect to come across. Combat is difficult, as enemies will not pull punches, taking you out quickly if you're out of position, and the game refuses to hold your hand at all to its benefit. You killed yourself because you cast healing when you were decaying and thus hurting yourself? The game isn't gonna warn you. You're the dummy who cast it and didn't look at your status. But hell, use that to your advantage on the enemy, throwing a healing spell on a decaying enemy. Combine your winter blast that will chill your enemies with some rain to freeze them. Hell, the combos at first seem to outclass the idea of damage with your weapons out of the water, until you realize that the most reliable damage is those melee weapons and can help keep a skill unused when you need it in a pinch. Hell, that's if you need to actually kill your enemies. There's a lot of ways to complete a single objective. Maybe you steal the item that you need. Maybe you talk your way out of a situation. Maybe you completely destroy a questline because that NPC you killed, yeah, he sort of had a couple. The choices are yours. And dear God, every moment of this game has been a combination of fun and frustration. Frustration of trying to figure out how you actually want to go about things. This is the perfect co-op game too. The amount of fun you can have discussing how to attack enemies with a friend, laughing at each other as you goof up like slipping on ice, or just the sheer discovery of things is fantastic. There's a lot of exploration in terms of the quests. You don't get exactly where you need to go at times, and you need to figure out, okay, should I go here? Who do I have to talk to? Is there a clue around me that I can figure out? This is done better in a group setting. And yes, the game is still playable in a single player setting, but trust me, co-op is a lot better. Buy Divinity Original Sin 2 if you like anything RPG or strategy. It's well worth the full price of admission and more. Number 1. Holonight Precision. Precision is exactly why Holonight, the little indie game that could, finds itself as the best gameplay game of 2017 for me. People may call me out for a bias on the indie game front, and to be fair, Holonight did start this list at number 6. But as I started to review each game, and started to really detail how they stacked up against one another, Holonight kept on winning the battles when I compared them, moving itself up the ranks. That's because Team Cherry designed a core engine that was the perfect combination of movement, combat, and overall strategy. It all started with the level design, and as I said in the review at the time, this is the best Metroidvania level design I have ever seen. So many good alterations and differences in each area made it so that the same enemy that you had encountered before was a whole new challenge, thanks to the way that you'd have to approach them. This was combined with how precise the combat was, where being off just a millimeter could be the difference between taking damage and hitting your enemy perfectly, and it never felt unfair. You were perfectly in control of the knight, and were punished for moving without thought. Almost every boss battle gave you a challenge as you tried to figure out the boss's patterns and work the safe zones out. Using the right combination of charms and finding that right strategy was a fantastic feeling, as you would need reflexes to pull them off, but that alone wouldn't get you through the fight. Timing was too precise. The simple moveset forced you to rely on more basic strategies. And that's a complaint I still don't understand to this day, that the combat is too simple, that there's only one combo and not a lot of skills. There doesn't need to be. Just like the original Super Mario, there's something satisfying about hitting that one thing correctly over and over again, getting that timing right, that precision right. It just felt brilliant. And then there's the brilliant twist on health regain that the game gives you. Having to stand still and heal your character via magic. I can't express enough how much this adds to the game, and how in awe I am when it comes to the timing of sections of it. You can heal in battle, but you can't just heal when you want. There are periods that each boss has that you can find, but you've got to know when they are coming, or the health that you just gained is going to be lost almost immediately. And if you know anything about me, you know that I tested the bounds of this, how forgiving it was, how unforgiving it was. From what I found, it must have taken days, no, weeks, no, months of QA in order to hit this perfect balance when it comes to the combat. And I have to say, Team Cherry, I actually feel like I let you down in my original review. Don't get me wrong, I said it was a must-buy, but looking at it now, it's more of a 96 than a 92 after looking over all the elements of the game, in particular the combat. This game is something special. Look, if you haven't played Holonight up to this point, do me a favor, go buy it right now. In fact, just for the purpose of spreading the love here, I will buy 3 copies of random people from the comment section of Holonight. That's how much I love this game and how much I want to see people out there play this game. Because guess what? It is worth your while. Anyway, I want to hear from you guys. Which games did you expect to be on this list that wasn't? Which games surprised you? Which games did you expect to be higher on the list? Don't bother with Breath of the Wild, because guess what? You're not going to win that argument. But leave your comments in the comment section below. And I understand that this was a very long top 10 video. If you know me, if you know this channel, you know that I'm not going to give you a 30-second clip. I'm going to explain myself as much as I can within 2 to 3 minutes, especially for this section. Anyway, coming up next on the channel will be another review or first impressions that are unrelated to the top 15 story games of the year. That will be coming in the 2 to 3 weeks. Now you may be wondering, why isn't it coming right after this? Well, there were games that I did want to play on the story-based list that I wasn't able to get to. Games like Doki Doki Literature Club, games like What Remains of Edward Fitch. So I need some time to play those games, even though I knew they wouldn't be on the gameplay list, because, well, they're story-based experiences. I would also like to thank my audience for being patient with me with this video. I know that I was planning on getting this done around January 15th, and it's now February 23rd. The thing is that there were games that I wanted to try, there were things that I wanted to do with this video, and it just took a while. Plus some real life stuff and some changing things in my real life. I just wanted to take some time on this. So I thank you for your patience, and hopefully it'll be worth it in the end. I mean, you did get an almost 50-minute video on the top 15 gameplay games of the year. Not sure why you wanted to watch it, but, you know, you have your own tastes. Anyway, this is Dragnix signing out, and as always, keep on gaming.